I am a reclusive old man living alone in the Appalachian wilderness, and I've lived in my little cabin for the better part of 50 years without incident. However, recently, things have started showing up on my doorstep and the contents are horrifying. It started with a note. A sheet of notebook paper I found taped to my door one morning. It read, "It's the pretty things that matter," scrawled in black ink in large lettering across the page. On the back, there was a Polaroid, an off-kilter photo of what looked like a chest or box surrounded by trees. A bit confused and unsettled, I set the note and photo on my coffee table and went on about my day, journaling and reading. There's not much to do in the woods of Appalachia, so my days were usually spent enjoying nature, hunting, and fishing. So that's what I did. I finished my chapter and journal entry, then set off into the forest, rifle on my shoulder and fishing rod in hand. The woods were eerily silent this day, which, if you know anything about Appalachia, is not a good sign. I was confident with my rifle though, and hiked on, following the path to the river that I'd taken a million times before. However, halfway through the hike, I discovered something that had not been on the trail before. A bloodied doll head was nailed through the forehead into a towering pine that swayed with the wind, its body nowhere to be found. Below the head, etched into the bark with what I assumed was a pocket knife, the phrase, "Isn't she pretty?" Jagged and messy. Feeling the unease wash over me, I decided it was best I return home for the day. The forest remained silent as I trekked back to the cabin, and it felt as though a million eyes were on me with each step I took. I could feel the atmospheric pressure change as thunder clapped overhead and the first droplets of rain began to fall. Making it back home, I locked up extra tight, placing a chair underneath my door handle and locking every window. The storm raged that night, and the wind howled outside, rocking the cabin back and forth gently. I had slept with my rifle, being the paranoid recluse that I am, and because periodically throughout the night, I thought I could hear the sounds of footsteps pounding against my front porch pacing back and forth along the tiny 4x5 space. Life was brought to my fears when the next morning, I found a new gift at my doorstep. The tattered and dirty shirt that appeared to have belonged to a little girl, between the ages of 4 and 8. In denial, I tried rationalizing the experience by telling myself the weather had blown the shirt onto the porch. The wind had swept it up and carried it miles just for it to settle directly on my front porch. An attempt for me to walk away from the situation. However, that rationalization quickly crumbled when I picked up the shirt, and beneath it lay another Polaroid photo. A little girl standing at a bus stop, oblivious. The same pink and purple butterflies on her shirt as the ones on the shirt I now held in my hands. On the back, in black Sharpie and neat handwriting was the phrase, "Isn't she pretty?" with a smiley face underneath. I immediately loaded up into my old Ford Ranger and made my way to the closest police station, presenting them with the evidence. Looking into their missing persons database, they found a match for the girl in the picture. Only she had gone missing over 30 years ago, and her case had gone cold after about 15 years. I explained the events to the police, with the doll's head and the photo of the chest that I had received 2 nights ago, and they told me everything I already knew about Appalachia. How people go missing up here by the thousands every year, and how an absurd number of the cases go unsolved. Nevertheless, they assured me they'd examine the Polaroid for fingerprints, and get back to me if they found any clues. Being a gun owner, I refused any police protection at my residence, and I myself assured them that I too would be keeping a close eye out for any suspicious-looking person lurking near my remote cabin. When I returned home, everything was just as I left it. No signs of any kind of trespassing or vandalism. I stayed in again this night, wanting to be here in case any more gifts arrived on my doorstep. While I was at my stove cooking that night, through the sound of my radio playing 70s rock music, I heard the creeping footsteps again on my front porch. I rushed to grab the rifle from my bedroom and came bursting through the front door to find the sight of a pale, sickly thin man, crouched down and peering into my kitchen window, Polaroid camera strapped around his neck. He was completely nude and bald-headed, and once he saw me, he screeched like an animal before springing over the baluster. I fired blind shots as he fled at inhuman speed into the woods, leaving shrubbery and branches shaking as he sprinted. I fired another shot into the forest in his direction and heard another screech, but the sprinting persisted. I leaped from the porch and chased as fast as I could through the dense forest, stumbling over roots and running into trees in the darkness. I could no longer hear the footsteps, so I gave up and walked back to the cabin, defeated. I did not sleep a wink that night. The whole evening was spent on my porch, waiting for him to come back. Next time, I would not miss. I waited until the sun came up, and no trace of the man returned. Becoming fluent in hunting during my time here in these woods, my first idea was to search for his blood. I had heard him screech again. I could have at least grazed an arm, and I could work from that. I searched the whole area and found no sign of blood anywhere. Defeated, I returned to the cabin. I went into town that day and bought some trail cameras that I placed around the area and on my porch. I was not going to miss my opportunity to catch or kill this guy again. Days came and went with no sign of the man. My trail cams caught nothing, and gifts stopped appearing on my doorstep. Days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months. I had almost succumbed and settled back into my life of comfort and serenity alone on my mountain until one faithful morning. A new gift was on my porch. Not only that, but doll heads were nailed to every tree surrounding the perimeter. It wasn't just doll heads either. Limbs were separated from the torsos and crudely nailed to the trees, making them look like dissected bodies. The same message under each display. "Isn't she pretty?" The new gift was a jewelry box, dusty and decaying. Inside were dozens of rusted and bloodied earrings, each one bearing some variation of a butterfly. After this, things escalated faster than I could account for. I took the jewelry box to the police station and yet again explained the situation to the local police chief. The earrings were taken in for DNA examination, and as the earrings were being removed, a new Polaroid was found underneath the pile. It was me, asleep in my bed, completely unaware, taken from beyond my bedroom window. The chief insisted I have police protection at my cabin, and this time I agreed. This man had managed to find the one blind spot in my trail cams, and now he was toying with me. DNA testing takes anywhere between 24 and 72 hours, so once more, I returned to the cabin, officers at my rear. As you'd imagine, it's difficult for me to park my Ranger on my property, let alone 2 additional police cars. That being said, the officers had to park their cruisers on the dirt road at the end of the driveway. The 2 officers stayed in their cars the whole night, rendering them nearly useless. That's what makes what happened next so frustrating. It had started to storm again, and lightning strikes flooded the cabin with flashing light every few seconds. Something was off, though. The strikes seemed out of sync with the storm. I focused in on this and noticed that there would be 3 quick flashes of light after every big flash of light, and then there'd be thunder. Lightning struck again, and in the living room window, the outline of the man came into view. 3 flashes came from his face before the outside went dark again. Once again, I ran outside, rifle in hand, but this time the man was gone completely, without a trace. Immediately, I confronted the cops in their useless cars, demanding they help search the area. They dared to seem annoyed with me as we searched the woods in the pouring rain. Finding nothing, the officers returned to their vehicles. By this point, it was around 4 in the morning, and the storm began to let up. Against my better judgment, I allowed myself rest. I awoke to sunshine and birds singing, a stunning contrast to the previous night. Stepping onto my porch, in place of a gift, I found dozens of Polaroids of myself arranged into the shape of a butterfly. Right in the center of the collage, I found something that broke me. My daughter, laughing as I pushed her on the swing. As happy as could be. 25 years ago, she had gone missing from our front yard as my wife and I worked around the house. Her disappearance broke me and my wife apart, and we divorced soon after, leading me to move here, into this cabin. I felt my heart break all over again, and I began to break down. I was absolutely grimaced to find that the police cars were no longer at the end of my driveway and were nowhere to be found. I lost my mind. I stomped through the forest screaming at the top of my lungs for the man to reveal himself, for him to show himself to me, and to stop being such a coward. The forest had grown silent again, aside from the sound of leaves rustling around me. The noise surrounded me as if something were running in circles around me, studying me. I couldn't even discern where it ended, but when it did, it was immediately replaced with a single sound. Click. My shroud of sanity fell, and I fired shots wildly in all directions. I listened as the unnaturally fast footsteps raced off deeper into the forest, laughing like a banshee. This was the last I saw of the man for a while. DNA evidence from the earrings came back as a match for 36 different missing children from the 80s and 90s. This time, a whole team came up to my little cabin and searched extensively for miles. Unbelievably, a warrant was served for the search of the cabin itself, which I obliged, too tired to care. The search went on for months, and nothing was found. I'd stare at the pictures of the man, naked on my trail camera, and burning hatred filled my heart. Murderous resentment that would keep me awake at night. The last gift the man has left me was his box from the first Polaroid he ever gave me. A traveler's trunk that you'd see on a train, across the top, the phrase, "All the pretty things." I opened it to find dozens of doll heads along with dismembered arms and legs made from hollow plastic. I found a variety of clothing, all with butterflies stitched into the fabric. But above all, I found pictures of dozens of little girls, none older than 12. Blood speckled the top of the pile, and I wanted to throw up, staring into the case. I kneeled there over the box, completely lost for words and in a trance for what felt like hours. The one thing that snapped me out of this state was when I heard the rustling of leaves off in the distance, followed by a sound that broke me.